Be Bourbon, we have in extended form tonight, Kristina Wong, who you have seen many times before with me on the banter discussions, but also from her probably prestigious award-winning defense reporting work, I'm assuming. Yes.
Yes, I actually won an award.
Did you? What'd you win?
It was the Society of Professional Journalists Award. It was for breaking news. It was during the Navy Yard shooting. God, this was maybe 2013, I think. Remember there was
yeah, I remember it.
Computer, I think it was like some sort of HR specialist, and he went in and started shooting up the place, and and I remember I was getting into like a zip car to go. Oh, I was supposed to speak at a panel at DINFOS or something like that. DINFOS is the public affairs school for civilians, defense civilians, and military PAOs. And I was on my way to go to Maryland to sit on a panel, and then this broke. And I remember I said, you know what, I better cancel. I started making calls to the Navy. Navy's pretty good with their public affairs, so they gave me like a ton of information. Actually led to an award, so I am technically, officially an award-winning journalist.
She's an award-winning journalist. I'm very well spoken on this show. It's only number 2, so.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So tonight we shall be fueled by 2 sourced bourbons, right? So we got this guy right here, Smooth Ambler Old Scout, MGP product from Indiana. I think the distillery themselves is, they're in West Virginia. This is the non-age stated one. And then we have the Wathan's Single Barrel, which is sourced, but it is Kentucky. What I find funny about this bottle is it's a complete clone of Elmer T. Lee. And I don't know if you knew this. Did you know there was a distillery that at least uses Fairfield as its home of base?
No,
me either. Until I saw this. I've had another one that they had. It was a 10-year they used to sell. They don't do it anymore. But anyway, Wathan's Single Barrel, sourced from Kentucky somewhere. It's tasty. It's great. You should drink it. And if you're not, it's fine, because I'm going to. And that's going to fuel this discussion with America's finest defense reporter, award-winning Kristina Wong. Before we do that, what I need you guys to do is subscribe, like, do all those things with this podcast on YouTube. Do it on Apple, Spotify, wherever it is you listen to these things. iHeartRadio, it's up there. It's all over the place. And then, of course, listen later this week when Kristina comes back again on There Will Be Banter. So you have plenty of opportunities to, get overwhelmed with how great we are. Is that fair? We're great, right? Greatness. Okay. Kristina's modest. I can be. Not right now. All right. So a little bit about Kristina. As she mentioned, she is a defense reporter, an award-winning defense reporter. So from California, you comfortable saying where in California where you're from? As I just say it, basically.
There's a lot of there's a lot of crazy. So I don't like to give exact information, but Bay Area, California.
I
mean, there's like a million Kristina Wong, so
well, you are definitely not the one that comes up when you start searching, which is kind of.
Oh, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, there's that other one. So you did go to UCLA, right? What took you to UCLA? I was curious about that.
Well,
especially coming from this area, so I figured maybe you'd go to another Berkeley, Stanford, one of those 2. Yeah. Did you just want to get out of the area?
Well, I wanted to get out of the area because, my older sister, she actually went to Berkeley, and she kind of wanted to stay near home. And plus, I actually had, I would say, aspirations of broadcast journalism and acting. Okay. And like everyone in California, I did do some theater though. I did a lot. I did I think 7 or 8 plays or so. So I did theater, and acting was just way, had an agent in where agents, and so I was calling a bunch of agents, just asking them, hey, should I buy these stickers? So you can buy these stickers with agents' addresses on them.
Mhm.
And so I think I called an agency and I'm like, should I buy these stickers? And this agent was like, what do you look like? And I'm like, oh, I'm 5'4", I'm Asian, I have dark hair. And he's like, and he goes, uh, come on in for a trial, or come on in for an audition. And I know that sounds sketch, but so
Yeah.
I've had plenty of
I've
sketch
seen this on the
situations.
internet before. Keep going.
Oh, I can tell you about the very sketch episode I had, which was probably like I don't know if he was a porn director or wannabe porn director, but anyway, so I go to this place and it's legit, and he gives me 3 monologues, and he says, prepare these and come back in, I think he said like 15 to 30 minutes. So I'm in the parking lot, I'm in the car, I'm trying to memorize them. They're very short monologues. So I come back and start performing them, and he starts doing some improv, and I'm like, in the moment, whatever. And then he goes, where have you been my whole life? And that sounds so cheesy, right?
Yeah.
So he goes, yeah, I love to represent you. And he was a legit dude, and I was like, yeah, sure. And as soon as I agreed, he started bombarding my voicemails with audition notices, which is what you want, right?
Right.
But so I was a student, and I was like, oh, I have class. I've got this test, I can't do it. And I was also kind of flaky. So, which is a surprise to you, I'm sure.
I was about to say, no.
That was an accident. I missed last week by accident. Okay. Anyway, so he goes, so just after a couple of times of just me not getting back to him, because it just seemed like I just took it for granted, right? I went on a couple of auditions, and they're not easy either. So I went on a couple of auditions, didn't book anything, and I was just busy with school and blowing him off. And he calls me, he goes, this is why I don't work with young people, because they're just flaky. He goes, call me after you're done with school. And I got really into international relations and foreign policy and journalism. And it just seemed like journalism seemed like a safer path to me at that time.
Yeah.
So I just didn't follow him, and plus I gained like 15 pounds, gained like the freshman, 15/20 30. So I kind of like, my interest shifted, and I wanted to just pursue, broadcast journalism, and it just kind of felt, I don't know, in a way like more important, more serious, less shallow and all that stuff. So yeah, I went down to pursue broadcast journalism and acting.
So, okay, now you get out of school. You decide you're going to go do the podcast thing. What led you to DC? How'd that come to fruition? Because you're not alone. Like, there's a ton of people that want to do this, and you've obviously been pretty successful in doing it. So, what was like the first step for you to get to where you're at now?
So I was a researcher on Tavis Smiley show.
Oh, wow.
I don't know
Okay, yeah, I know who
Tavis
he is.
Smiley show,
I
but
do.
it's he's a Black host, and the show deals with Black issues, and it was a good job. I met my best friend there, and met some great people there. But I was just really, it wasn't what I wanted to do.
Right.
If broadcast journalism was what I wanted to do, I was a researcher on a public affairs show, and it was fine, but it was very just not what I wanted to do. So I went to, I spent this was 2006. Actually, I think 2005, I went, oh, sorry, I'm skipping around. It's hard to remember everything. So I was also working at ABC News in Los Angeles.
Oh, okay,
And
cool.
so I was working at ABC News Los Angeles. And then I went to Tavis Smiley, and I was there for 2 years. And then, so I was still working kind of part-time at ABC. So I went out to the DC bureau, the ABC News DC bureau, and I sat down, I talked to them about coming to that bureau. And so we did this little mini interview. And so the woman there goes, "Oh, okay, when can you start?" I'm like, "Oh, in like a year."
Not
And
really.
so she was like, okay, you just wasted my time. But so I moved to DC. Eventually moved to DC. And before I did, I also applied to grad school, so Georgetown, and then I also went to China. So it was kind of like, I like to
China.
go big.
Yeah. Yeah.
China. So
China.
yeah, so I like to go big, and that's how I kind of use what I used to do, is just like every couple years I do something like kind of crazy. And before I went to China, um, I didn't know anyone there. I didn't have any contacts. I didn't actually, some of my dad's friends. So he had one friend who was doing documentaries, or who had done some documentaries in China. So we had like lunch in Chinatown, San Francisco, and she says to me, "Don't go there. It's too hard. It's too hard for someone like you with no contacts, no connections, to deal with the Chinese communist officials. Do not go."
Were
I
they talking
went
about for work, or you were just trying to go for just a visit?
just to visit.
Oh, okay, so they felt like that was going to be overwhelming for the Kristina Wong. Okay.
Well, and also, I mean, my Chinese skills were very bad. So we didn't grow
Yeah.
up speaking Chinese in the
Right.
house, so I took some Mandarin classes, and, not enough to like, basics, but I wasn't, fluent. I was barely conversational. So, I was very just stubborn. I mean, I think something that's like a constant is just that if you tell me I can't do something, I'm going to go do it. So then went to China. I spent all summer there
Oh, really?
teaching
Yeah.
English, and then I
So
was
yeah, I was
teaching.
going to ask. Well, hold on. So you said you were there teaching English. So do they speak a lot of English there, or is it just something that they want to learn, or was this just a very specified class for someone?
Yeah, so this is
Is this
it's very
university English or?
it's
Okay.
after school. And so basically I was teaching rich Chinese parents' children.
Ah,
And
okay.
and so these Chinese kids, they go to school all day, and then after school they go to English school.
Hmm.
So they are in school like 8 hours, during the day, and then an additional, I would say, like 2 3 hours in the evening, on top of their all day at school. And these kids, so I taught, mixed grade kids, and they were really proficient in English. So you have like 8-year-olds with like perfect English, and they speak in a very like defined way. So
Mhm.
you say, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And then they'll say, "Well, first, I want to have a good job at a multinational company. Second, I want to get married and have kids. And third, I want to buy a house and have 2 cars. And finally,
Yeah.
and go in conclusion." And it
Damn
just
3.5 paragraph essay is what it is. Speaking in essay form.
yeah, and it completely blew me away.
Yeah.
That's when I thought, okay, yeah, we're pretty screwed if their English and their grammar is
Yeah.
better than mine. And it was funny because if you are a Caucasian who's teaching English in China, the school gets to charge the parents more than if you're a non-white person teaching kids. And because you're white, you know, they figure the white person knows how to speak better English than
Yeah.
the Asian person. So.
Well, little did they know that you are the Kristina Wong from UCLA. So that's okay. But so they were, you said it was rich kids, so they're obviously raising them to do a specific purpose. And then I guess if their first point of what they want to do is be a part of a multinational company, I think that's pretty obvious, right? So
Yeah, it was pretty eye-opening. So my whole thing was, so
I wonder what American rich kids grow up wanting to be. You know what I mean? Do they are they is
yeah,
there like that
YouTube.
set of them? You're in DC. Is there any like, you know, the little rich kids there? Are they learning Mandarin right now? Maybe or Arabic? I wonder
My
what
area.
language.
I'm
Yeah, I
not
wonder
in the
what language
super
they're
rich
learning.
area of DC. I'm in like the middle class area. I'm in,
Is there
actually.
one? Is there one of those? There's a middle class area in DC.
I think we're in the nice-ish area, but there's like an area that's like super super nice, and that's Georgetown, and then
Yeah.
slightly between between Georgetown and Maryland is like the super 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 swanky. It's like where I forget what the school's called, but that's where like all the dignitaries send their kids. That's where like the Obamas sent their kids. What's that? No, no, even nicer. He said Duke Ellington. It's even nicer. It's some fancy.
Was it American University? No.
No, it's a high school. It's like
Oh, it's a school. Oh, well, I
Sid,
definitely don't know.
Sidwell Friends. It's Sidwell Friends High School where
Oh,
Malia and Sasha Obama went, and yeah, so it's a super swank. Um, although
good for
there
them.
is some, there's a VIP who lives across the street from us. Um, Obviously, no one knows where I live, but right across the street, there's Secret Service guarding a house.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, and I have no idea who it is.
Go knock on the door.
I think the Secret Service would probably stop me.
Well,
There's like,
then you just then I don't know. Maybe hey, who's in there? See what they say. I mean, you're a reporter. You're supposed to get to the story. What's going on?
I will. I'll get there. I'm just building up trust.
You
So
know what you got to do is you just get the address and just mail them something. See what happens. Invite them to
like
your wedding.
I
There you go.
thought about bringing over cookies. That might be a good idea. Actually, I can have Aaron make
Eh,
some cookies.
bring over bourbon. I think that's a better idea.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
But
Cookies
sugar
is
chips
overrated.
poured out.
Yeah, it could be spoiled or it could be poisoned. Bourbon, you got to break the seal on it. It's good. It's America's spirit, as you know. Okay. All right. So you went to China for the summer. You come back. Did you finally moved to DC to ABC or was this somewhere else?
I went to ABC, and
ABC.
yeah, and ABC News. I can talk about ABC because I don't have any kind of like
Did you
non-disclosure.
who was the ABC guy? Was it Ted Koppel at the time? Was he still there?
Oh, no, it was I think Peter Jennings. I think he's like
Oh
the,
yeah, that guy.
so he died at some point. I don't remember. All of this is kind of a blur, but uh Charlie Gibson, I think,
Yeah.
maybe was the anchor, and then it was Diane Sawyer for World News. And then now it's like David Muir. I don't watch TV. I
I
don't
don't
watch
either.
news.
I don't watch it either.
But so in the DC bureau, you don't have, the show World News Tonight is and Good Morning America
Yeah.
taped out of New York.
Right.
This week with George Stephanopoulos is taped out of DC. So that was kind
Ah,
of
okay.
their big show.
Is that
But
to have access to the Capitol and all those folks, basically? Yeah.
exactly. And I think when George Stephanopoulos became the Good Morning America guy, I think he wanted to do both Good Morning America and This Week. So I think he might do it from New York. I'm not sure. This happened, I think 20 like 12ish. So I don't know. I have no idea what's going on in the company anymore. So you know, as I shouldn't. So I mean, it was traumatizing. I mean, network news is extreme. My experience there was like pretty. I mean, late hours,
Why is
really
it traumatizing?
stressful.
Why? Because it's just It never ends, or what?
I mean,
Or is it super hard on you, or?
I think the nature of TV news is not for everyone. It's
Well,
just,
yeah.
it's, it is just so stressful and it takes so much out of you. I mean, you
Different
really
world than print
do.
type of thing.
Oh, completely. I mean, first of
Yeah.
all, you have no control over anything. I mean, you are one tiny cog in a big machine, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and so the difference with like print journalism is like you are the reporter, you're writing, you're,
Yeah.
you know, you're doing a lot of stuff. You're gathering all information. Whereas network news, you've got so many people, you know, who are working together to put together one little story. So, you know, one little story, you need photos, you need videos, you need, you know, people to talk to and experts and, you know, camera people. And it's like so much work. And it's really like a team effort to do anything there. Whereas a reporter, you know, web or print reporter, it's just you know, you call up your sources, you write your story. It's completely different. It's a lot less stress.
So, I mean, your experience was, that's how it was, but can you look back? Like, when did it get to that point? Do you think? Like, it was always
Of
because I'm
like
just
his
trying to figure out, like, I get like the purpose behind it, right? But at the same time, just with the evolution of media as a whole, like, look where you work now, obviously, and just how your career path's gone. But like, let's be honest, I don't know anybody who watches ABC News or any network news. I don't. Like, I do know,
no.
obviously, people get themselves spun up over their, network anchor of choice, whoever that would be. But like the network stuff, I get it. These massive, like, entrenched into society and culture, like, news organizations. But I don't, like, where does that go? I think, have they already kind of peaked? Like, there's no, like, you know what I mean? Like, the next superstar media person or whatever, like, they're probably not coming from ABC News or CBS or
Yeah,
NBC. Like,
and I, exactly.
the biggest thing
And
they
I
do, I
saw
think, at this point is those networks, they cover sports. Like, there's two things I think. I hear this point made all the time from Colin Cowherd, so I'll give him a good credit because he says it all the time. But the only two things that people in America really watch anymore are live events, right? And what are those? Sports and politics. That's it. There's only two things that people really watch. Because even look how TV's evolved, right? You stream everything,
yeah.
or you binge it all on a weekend. Like, no one really, oh my, it's Thursday at 7:30 p.m. I got to watch my show. Like, that doesn't happen anymore now, right? That just doesn't happen. So I'm just
No. And
curious, like, go ahead. I'll stop speaking for like 2 seconds. Go ahead.
no, when I was there, it was like so I'd worked at ABC, I think, you know, pretty much on and off and part-time and full-time for a very long time. So, you know, like 8 years basically.
Oh, really?
And just during that time, I mean, starting from LA to DC, you know, like, because I first got a paid internship, which was pretty awesome. You know, I got recruited at some job fair. So it was like, with the internship with the, you know, LA bureau to move to DC bureau, in total it was like a long freaking time, right? So
Yeah.
that's about 8 years. And I saw so much change during that time, just so much change in the way people consume media, the way. And it's funny because we're now at the point where I always consumed media. You know, I think that's our generation where, you know, no one has time to sit down and watch the evening news. And so when I was at ABC at the DC bureau, there was just this sense of, you know, the sense of we're on a sinking ship. And there was even that sense in LA. It was like the big fear. And I hope there's not some like ABC News lawyer who's gonna like come out of the woodwork and like sue me or something. I don't think I'm disclosing anything, like, you know, whatever. I don't think I have any kind of, you know, people in media are so touchy. Anyway, so there was a
Yeah, because they
sense.
think they're important. They're not.
and that's another, I'm just so happy not to. I'm like a non-journalist journalist. Like I hate whole. I just
You're
hate.
actually normal and you have a personality.
I try. I mean, I like just yeah. I don't like the whole ego that's in journalism.
Mm.
So there's just this sense of a sinking ship. And when I was in DC, ABC started downsizing. So it went from like 1,200 to like 800. They cut 400 jobs, and it
From
was
just the news side? Because I
from the
assume they're separate, right? Okay, I got you.
from the news side, and a lot
Yeah.
of it was just and I'm just speaking, from what I know, which is like kind of limited.
Right.
And I think it had to do with like mergers and decisions made by
Yeah, I was gonna say, did
Disney.
Disney already own ABC back then? Or
They
okay.
did. And so it was usually some decision made by someone on the top. And like it was like the Hunger Games, So because I mean, literally it was like, okay, every unit has to lose some people.
Yeah.
And it was like, who's that person going to be? Because there's so many different units, and it was just like very cutthroat, at least from my perspective.
Yeah.
And you never knew, like,
You see
what was
that a
going to
lot
happen.
going on right now, though, with
Oh,
ESPN. It
yeah.
seems like every year or two they have another round of these layoffs. But I think they're doing that to themselves. It's because they've decided to inject politics into sports. Now, don't get me wrong, sports has always had some sort of political angle that you can tie to it, but I think ESPN has decided, and this was probably maybe with their previous president, not so much with the guy now, but like they decided to go full on political, but not even that. It's just they went full on political and just one side only.
Mm.
Like you could do this, just balance the shit out, right? That's all. It's okay to have voices from all sides. That makes actual, entertainment. But if you're just gonna or if you're just gonna pander to one side, you automatically, you alienate one portion of your audience. That's, in my opinion, I'm not a business major, but I would assume I don't want to isolate potential customers just based on the stuff that I, put out for consumption, right? It doesn't seem like a very good business plan.
Speaking just in general, because I don't know it. No one ever said anything specifically, but it seems like a lot of news outlets make their decisions on future consumers. So I think around like 2010, 2011, 2012, I remember there was a study that said something like, minorities are going to be more the majority by, I think it was like 2030 or something. And I started to see more, hiring at top levels of certain minorities because they were assumed to be the next consumer class, the consumer demographic. So so just working in news for so long, you start to see like very cynically, what decisions are made for what reason. Like maybe they decide to hire an Asian, reporter or Asian anchor or Latina anchor, and then there's, investment in this, Spanish speaking, cable network. And so there's a lot of, and I wonder with the, all this like woke stuff, they have to think that, oh, this is a good decision for us, people are going to buy more stuff from us, so I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just like free advertising because, people,
Well,
I really
everything's a
don't know. I
boomerang.
don't know if it's working or not.
Yeah, it's a boomerang though, right? Because we saw this, I think it kind of came to a head with, the Kaepernick thing several years ago, which, just to me, like, look, I get it. It's no real mystery which way I lean, but I also try to pride myself on having some common sense. And I never felt like, until some random sports reporter pointed out that, Colin Kaepernick, if this was like after the second or third week he was doing it, was kneeling during the national anthem. Then all of a sudden it became a story. But who cares? There's some dude who doesn't even play who's kneeling on the sideline because of the national anthem. All right, let's find out why he's doing it. Let's ask him. And that's it. But, okay, he spoke his reason. He's trying to bring awareness to something. novel concept, novel, noble cause, got it. But why that became like this, everyone take a stand issue made zero sense to me. Cause like, even, my parents fell victim to this. I remember my mom asking me very specifically, like, well, so what do you think? Where are you at on this? And I'm like, that's disrespectful to the military. I'm like, how is that disrespectful to the military, Mom? Please tell me. Like, I just love to ask, like, fine, if that's how you feel, tell me how. Well, it is. How? It just is. Please tell me how. And there's never an answer, right? And that's so many issues. It's like everyone gets spun up emotionally in their knee-jerk reaction, or they're feeling like they have to take a stand on something. And we talk about this on the banter thing. It's like, hey, everything at this point starts out by default. Half of the people are offended, half aren't, and then you got to try and figure out what's going on in the middle. And that was my thing with that. And that kind of pushed a ton of viewers away from the NFL, because the NFL was the one to take the most of the brunt early on. And, hey, they're the biggest sport in this country. So that brings a lot of attention to stuff. But then you go back to last year during the pandemic, right? And you had every sport, major sport in America, let's put it that way, having to feel like, whether they believe it or not. And that's my thing. I don't think half of them believe that. I feel like they're doing it because they feel like they have to. And that goes to baseball and the NBA, of course. But you see, it is actually having tangible effect on viewership and ratings. Like, it really is. Like, no one watched the NBA finals last year. Like, no one did. Like, more people watched what was it? An American Athletic Conference college football game, which is, my school, University of Central Florida, whatever. More people were watching those things than watching the NBA finals last year. Worst ratings in NBA history, I think, for the finals. And so that's kind of where I come out on that thing, is that we're making political issues out of things that never were before. And it may just be because of the evolution in the way we consume media today, because everything's social media, right? So everyone feels they have to take a stance, or everyone feels they have to have an opinion on something. Everyone's in a rush to react rather than a rush to be right, as Colin Cowherd, for the second reference, likes to say all the time. But I think that's true. Like, we make issues out of things that I don't even think are that important, and it gets amplified on social media to be bigger than it is. And like I always like to point out is, hey, if this is so big to you on social media, just go outside. Go talk to your neighbors. Go talk to people outside. Is that how everyone acts to each other or feels?
Yeah. And I think there's something larger at work that, like, one of our smart goon buddies like Lafayette Lee or Braxton could probably talk really,
Those guys are way smarter than me.
Yeah, probably me too. So let's see if I can, like, articulate it, but it's, I there's definitely something that is going on that most of us are just not aware of. And so I did a story that was looking into the defund the police movement, right?
Yeah, that's
So
smart.
the defund the police movement actually began in like 2010, right?
Really?
And it began in Oakland. It started as like a
Shocking.
Occupy.
Occupy Wall
Right.
Street, right? Was it part of that whole shenanigan?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that makes sense.
And there is, and I don't want to sound conspiratorial about this. You're like, oh, but there is a lot of money being poured into organizers, right? Into these, I've heard them called like, these, they're like an alphabet soup of organizations,
Yeah.
right? They're very small political activist organizations that all rally around some sort of cause, and they're very good at organizing. It's like, not just the ACLU, but all sorts of these organizations that are rallying around abolish ICE, defund the police. I mean, these are,
Well, look where
they're
Oakland
one
is,
in,
right?
what's that?
What's Oakland next to?
Berkeley.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, so I won't assume, but Andrew Breitbart. Did you ever read his book?
Probably should say yes because I
If you
got.
didn't, it's fine. But no, so
No,
but he goes
I
in.
haven't read this book. I know I really want to. I have his book and I need to
Yeah,
read
so,
this.
well, he goes into this.
Thank
He
you for
talks about
allocating it.
it's the left's the way the left. That's the problem is people think the left isn't they're not smart. They actually are. They're very damn smart and they're very cunning and they play the long game. And they've done this. This is what you're describing right now. He talks about how they took over two things in the 60s and 70s. The green movement, which was, environmental, that movement, and they took over education, higher education. And that's where you're at right
Mm.
now. And that's exactly what you're describing. So,
Mhm.
okay, there you go. But go
Yeah.
ahead.
I mean,
So
and
2010,
and
Occupy
so
Wall Street was a big thing, which was like the non-violent protest version of, I guess, Antifa and all that silly shit that's going on today,
oh
right?
yeah, exactly. Precursor. Right. So
Yeah.
you had Occupy Oakland, you had Occupy Wall Street. It was basically, I think, the first time I was ever aware of. I think you even had like Occupy DC, and
Oh,
I
is that what you're making
remember.
cities just about? Like I remember they did this in Orlando. I was living in Orlando at the time, and I remember there's like this little small section on the corner, and we would all walk by like, "What are you doing? Stop it!" Because downtown Orlando's tiny compared to these massive
Yeah,
metropolitan areas. It was just silly. It's like, what are you guys doing? Go back to work or wherever you're at. But anyway, yeah.
yep. They occupied a park in DC, just one park, and it seemed like, oh, this is so cool. This grassroots organize, this grassroots organization, camping out in this, and there was like this person makes food. This person, it was kind of like,
Yeah,
what do you
there's like
call
no
it?
end game though. It's the same with like what do you do
Yeah,
now? Great, you got the park. What are you gonna do? I don't
yeah.
know. I'm just gonna hang out until they tell me I can't anymore, man. Like it's
Yeah. I mean, it seemed like cool and fun to that, at first, and novel, and then and then it got cold and everyone dispersed,
yeah.
right? It's like as soon as it got cold, it was like gone, or
Yeah.
like a
And you know what
superhero
else? What it gave way to though? What came after Occupy Wall Street? Do you remember?
Tea Party movement.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm just curious
Your
if there's
on
another like a
movement.
2.0 coming, because everything's pendulum, right? In this country, everything swings one way or the other. Like there was that rush
Um,
to react to
and the
Trump.
Tea
It's the same
Party,
reaction to Biden right now. Like this stuff is swings back and forth. Maybe it's swinging back quicker because there was always very cyclical with elections. And I feel like we're going to get into that. And I think I've already discussed this before with us is that, it used to be like, all right, we'll give each party 8 years. I don't think people are doing that anymore. It's like, hey, if we don't like what you're doing in 4, you're gone. And
and
that's
I
at every
kind of
branch,
like
not just the president. I think that's the Senate, their 6-year term, or the Congress. Hey, like, you got one term, get it right or you're gone.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to what you were saying. I mean, so I think we all saw social web 1.0 was like a complete
Yeah.
bust. It was like, ooh, AOL, we can instant message each other, and then it like completely imploded, right? And it was I think my dad had just missed it because I think he was like, oh, I'm gonna learn how to fix computers or something, and it was
Uh-huh.
like
Yep.
before the programming wave, right? And then it's like everyone wanted to be a programmer, and then it just went, it just flopped. And then you had web 2.0, which was, you saw the advent of YouTube and all these like cool Twitter and like all these cool social
Yep.
media apps that suddenly gave people the ability to speak out and organize and get together and all that stuff. And yeah, so it really I think fueled this organizer type energy, I guess you would say, and I think it's sort of being, of course, it's being manipulated by big
Yeah.
tech, and so I think there's whatever's lost in consumership has to be made up some other way, whether it's big money. I haven't drawn like the connections or the thread, but it's like, these small organizing groups. So just going back to my story, you have this movement in 2010, and then around, I think it's 2015, you have this. I think it was this young black, it was a group of it was like, I forget what it's called, but it was like BYP 500 or something. It was sort of, the whole group is to help young African Americans organize, and so around that time, the defund the police movement really took off. That kind of became, I think their their rallying cry, and then you saw them link up with abolish ICE folks. So you've got defund the police and abolish ICE, which basically lead to the same thing, which is to
Right.
dismantle, any kind of these
To weaken
very,
law enforcement, essentially.
exactly,
Right.
law enforcement. And you even had protests where the two came together. I think this was in Chicago or something. And too bad they don't have, well, no, I do have my cell phone right here. I could probably look it up. But yeah, this is not 2000 anymore. But so yeah, you actually had dual protests where you had some people doing abolish ICE and defund the police in the same rally. And so I think what we're seeing is, you know it's it could be a bet. It could be a bet by corporations, like, you know what, we might lose these people, but we're going to gain these people. This is the
That's a dumb.
future.
I think it's a dumb bet for a corporation because, like, whether we feel one way or the other towards an issue,
Hmm.
at the very core of it, there's such a small percentage of people who are going to actually take place or take part in any of these types of, you know, demonstrations or destructive behavior and all, because that's unfortunately what we're seeing. We're not seeing, the peaceful protest. We're seeing the opposite. We're seeing the actual uh the riot, as you call it. Martin Luther King talked about riots being the voice of the unheard, right? Well, if that's what we're going to do, I find it really hard to believe that you're going to get your point across and create some, you know, lasting social change by burning down a fucking 99-cent store, right? Like burning down the neighborhood dollar store. Like, I don't see how that is what is going to be somehow beneficial to your cause. And that's my issue right now. And, you know, if all goes well, we're going to talk to Julio Rosas next. Can't even say his name. I'm going to talk to him next week, who likes to chase these riots. He's like a storm chaser, but he's a riot chaser. I'm going to dub him that. Hopefully he runs with it. But anyway, so the reason I bring all that up is it kind of goes back to what you're saying is, it's coming. Okay. Like it's very early in 2021, but people are getting back into the street. People are being able to go open up their states and all. Like, this stuff is not stopping. You already see it picking up this last week with the shooting of that guy up in um Minnesota.
Dante.
The Chauvin trial is going to wrap up any minute now. This stuff is there's shootings going on. Unfortunately, it seems like every week again. So this stuff's not over. It's not going to stop, and unfortunately, we're going to see more of it. But my problem with it is like, to what end is your cause? What is the point?
Yeah.
Okay, look, I got it. Okay, I have a real issue with law enforcement looking like special operators. I got it. We've talked about this ad nauseum. I don't like the militarization of the police. I never will. I don't think that's what they're supposed to look like in terms of being members of their community. You're supposed to be members of your community. You're supposed to look and represent them. They shouldn't feel like they're at war with their police force, right? Grant, you can do a lot of things with police and help them react and interact with their community better. Start with not making them look like they're, going to war with terrorists in Iraq or Afghanistan. Aside from that, when this whole like defund the police thing is like, oh, let's replace them with mental health people and all this. Yeah,
Mhm.
good luck with that. Great.
Yeah.
Good luck with it.
It's essentially, and 4 years ago, I would have thought that some of this was crazy, but it is essentially dismantling any kind of, you know, uh, sort
It's
of
moved quickly.
authority. It's what?
It's moved pretty quickly on,
It's moved extremely quickly. Yeah. So the organization in 2015 that was called the Black Youth Project.
Okay, there you
And it was
go.
actually founded by University of Chicago professor. So a bunch of crazy radicals over in University of Chicago. Yeah. So yeah, I can link this story, but it was amazing that, you kind of go through this whole, I mean, Defund the Police had been around for like 10 years before it blew up. So it's like building the backbone,
I
putting the
don't know
structures in
what.
place for this giant explosion that we're seeing. And so I would think that the Colin Kaepernick thing was part of the wave. It was part of a movement that was already brewing,
Yeah,
So it wasn't
but
like came out of nowhere. And I think, it really just relies on people being cowed. It really
yeah,
relies on people not saying anything, because most of people you and I know are probably just, reasonable, moderate
right.
people, but no one wants to be labeled a racist, and
Yeah.
I mean, it's becoming
And then
to
the problem
where
is if once you are, it's like you're on it. You have to. You're. It's almost like you have the burden to defend yourself over what someone
exactly
accusing you of
it's
something that
almost too
isn't
much
to
trouble.
not be true.
I mean, it's almost too much trouble. So I got in a
Yeah.
lift one time, and there was this white guy with a beanie and his little like North Face like puffy jacket, and he was listening to like NPR, and he was like, "Why can't the National Guard just shoot the Trump protesters?" And I was like, "Oh my God!" Like,
Because
first
this
of all,
isn't
you
fucking
kind of just
South America and some third world shithole where the military doesn't give a fuck or doesn't represent the actual people. That's why you,
yeah,
that's what I
and
would have
that's a
said.
normal sentiment. Yeah, really.
Yeah, that's what
But
we
of
do.
course,
We
I'm
want to have our own soldiers shooting Americans. That's a great plan. Good idea there, Lyft driver guy. But
and
like,
there's no
do
stop
people
on the
say this
left.
shit
Yeah,
out loud? Yeah, it's like it doesn't make any sense. It
and so you have to sort of be proactive because it's so popular. And Matt Gaetz, who's under fire right now, but he was on a couple of Clubhouse chats, and he was like, it's hard for conservatives to speak openly. It's hard for them to say like I'm a Republican in any kind of social setting. I guess I'm speaking mostly in like big cities like
yeah.
DC or the big cities in California, but it is just, I mean, there's so many people who are, they don't have strong opinions, but they're going to let the narrative sort of be taken over by the left because they just don't want to fight because it's just too much trouble. They just want to, work and raise your kids and go home at the end of the
Yeah, but
day.
you know
And
what? And I think, you mentioned Braxton earlier in the show. We're talking about Braxton McCoy. For those who don't know who the man is, he's been on this show with me. He's got his own podcast and show going on right now that I encourage you to listen to. But he talks about this all the time with people on the right. And I don't care if you're on the right. I don't care if you're on the left. The problem is the left is not afraid to fight and constantly push or be in lockstep with an idea. The right in America is the exact opposite, as Kristina just described. They don't want to fight. They don't want to do anything. They don't want to do anything to upset the status quo. They just want to kind of go along to get along. And the problem is, if that's how you feel, then fine. Just be aware and cognizant of the fact that the outcome of that strategy in anything, not just with political ideology or cultural or any of that stuff, is if the more you allow an opposition to get away with or do their idea and push their agenda, eventually you don't have anything left. It's just all it
it's
is.
true.
All that is that. And I
True.
think what was it? Um, it was Jesse Kelly put this out, and I don't listen to a lot of Jesse Kelly. Like he's a little much for me. But I mean, I get what he's doing. It's just not my thing. But
Yeah.
he did point out, what was this meeting recently of 100
Oh
companies,
yeah,
like
exactly.
to
Like
to come
social media
together on a response to a state's vote. Like, we have a constitution for a reason, and you as a company shouldn't have any involvement in that. And if your headquarters are in a state, you probably set up in that state for a reason. I'm going to guess it's probably benefits you financially.
and it's I want to say, and this is that I don't have actual like statistics, but I think these are all the same people because
Probably.
you know, because a lot of Obama folks went to Facebook and Twitter. A lot
Yeah.
of them did. A lot of them went to, I mean, it was kind of going from one powerful institution to the next. And there are a ton of Obama alumni in all these tech companies, and ton of Capitol Hill Democratic, alumni also working for Twitter and Facebook in their policy, offices in DC. So there's so much. I don't know what the word is, like interconnectedness. And so these people are like one and the same. It is surprising though that you have corporations involved, but I mean, not social media. So I separate social media with like Nike or whatever. I don't know if Nike was part of the group, but some sort of corporation. It used to be like you said, that you would focus on their bottom line and profits, but now it's just like they're throwing all in with the woke side. And I think they could very well be the every company has diversity, equality and inclusion person, and it could very well have been someone who worked in policy in Washington. So they're all this. It seems like they're all the same kind of people, and it's a very class based thing. It's a very coastal elite
Yeah.
type. They all know each other, and it's kind of an incestuous group, and they've decided that they're the masters of the world, right? And I think, who was it that I think maybe it was Peter Thiel, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, the tech entrepreneur. He said, and this was very enlightening for me. He said at a Nixon seminar at the Richard Nixon Foundation, they have these monthly talks. He said that a lot of these tech companies, they don't see themselves as American, even though they're American companies. He said, for example, when Hong Kong democracy protests were cropping up, he said that there were some, that were sympathetic towards the Hong Kongers, for who were
Yeah.
protesting against China and the Communist Chinese Party. But there were more Chinese nationals in Facebook. I think it was Facebook that didn't want to weigh in. So there ended up being nothing. There was no statement, there was no uproar, there was no nothing. There was nothing coming out of Facebook because of the Chinese nationals that work there. And so you have, it seems like a lot of, whether it's corporations or big tech, there's a lot of throwing your lot in with whatever you see is going to be profitable in the future. And maybe they see wokeism because that's where the money is going. So there's a lot of conjecture for me, but it's just so, I mean, it's happened, like you said, at an extremely fast pace. And I think we just weren't attention to the groundwork that was being laid, and now it's just, you've got a cowed population and public. You've got an empowered woke class empowered by big tech and corporations, and they're just going for it, and then right now you've got, Democrats control the White House and Congress. And I think, if you're right that, the pendulum swings, maybe, we'll see a swing back. Who knows?
Yeah, it always does. And you brought up a guy that we always know as well, Lafayette Lee on Twitter. But no, he wrote something earlier, or he at least brought attention to something earlier, which kind of ties into what you're saying. Is like, I'm going to quote this because it's from an actual scientific journal, and it quotes the near total failure of the median voter, the average American voter. They have basically a minuscule, near zero, statistically non-significant impact on public policy. So to put that into the average speak, is like the average voter, we vote we go to the polls every 2 years, every 4 years for whatever. You don't really affect anything. And it gets to another side where it talks about interest groups do have substantial impact on public policy. And a few groups, talking about the economic elites, are the ones who have the true influence on public policy. All right, that's an actual scientific journal. These are actual people doing studies on voting and policy in America, and what they're pointing out, and this is peer reviewed and accepted, is that, hey, we tell everybody to go out and vote every couple of years, but you don't really have any impact on what's actually getting done. And I'm not saying this as any, I don't care what party you ascribe to or vote for, but think about it really, right? Watch your reps. What do they actually say? Or do they actually speak on behalf of their constituency, or do they just speak on behalf of the capital letter that's next to their name? But you wrote a story, or at least published something today about the upcoming withdrawal from Afghanistan. Finally, what can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So, like you said, Trump negotiated a Taliban. All U.S. troops were going to be out by May 1st. And then the Biden administration went through this protracted discussion period where they basically came to the same conclusion, except they're going to pull out like by September 11th. And some people are they're kind of annoyed by the choice, choosing that date. They say, it's bad optics. And also NATO, the NATO partners and allies, they're coming out as well. So as far as, details, so it's been very disappointing with details, but I'm not shocked because the Obama administration was notoriously not candid. It was notoriously bad with, being transparent. And it's funny because I think because they feel like they can just, stiff arm the media more than, Republicans, and Republicans are like, oh, we have to be transparent. Anyway, so I'm not surprised there was this a leak to the Washington Post. And then there was shortly after, there was a NSC conference call where a senior administration official, formally announced, this is what we're going to do. And we're going to withdraw all troops. He did not, since it was such a small conference call with, it seems like a small group of reporters, no one asked, okay, is this the Resolute Support Mission? Is this Freedom Sentinel? And Freedom Sentinel, that's the one that's really dominated by the Special Operations Forces, right? So that's about I think 2,000 or so. And then the rest are Resolute Support folks who train the Afghan troops. And I hear, first of all, there's not even a lot of training going on, and it's not even all that effective. So, that wouldn't be a loss if they were gone anyway. But the whole, because ISIS has cropped up in Afghanistan. So the people who are really keeping that under wraps is, at bay is the Special Operations Forces, going after Al Qaeda and ISIS and a whole bunch of other terrorist groups in Afghanistan. So me personally, I'm actually impressed that Biden had the nerve to do this.
Agree.
I think it's a good move too.
Yep.
So I'm actually impressed. I know that folks in the MAGA movement are also happy about this, and I too think it's time to come home because this is our longest war. We're never supposed to be in this kind of footing.
Nope.
For so long. It affects families, and that's what pisses me off the most when people talk about, oh, we can't leave Afghanistan because there could be another 9/11, or there could be this, or could be that. Think about the families who, this really takes its toll on troops, Special Operations Forces or conventional. It's like birthdays missed, holidays, but also it's divided. It's also given birth to a cottage industry around war, and it hasn't been all, I wouldn't say, So, I mean, for me, as someone who studied, political science and was into foreign policy, I admit that at one point it was like, oh, Dave Kilcullen, he's a counterinsurgency expert, and David Petraeus, wow, he's so great, and Stanley McChrystal, like I totally fell for the cult of, these generals
Yeah.
and all this stuff. And so did everyone.
Yeah. Well, now
But
it's just, but unfortunately, it's not. It's all being sheltered or burdened by the same people. You know what I mean?
yeah,
That's
yeah,
my issue. Is
yeah.
that like this is not a war that's shared by America as a whole. It's just not. Because if it was, maybe people would care a lot more.
And yeah, and it's having a lot of secondary effects. It's creating, not only is it creating this cottage industry of these so-called experts in foreign policy who think they're better than everyone else and so smart on everything else, but it also does create sort of a warrior class, especially you and I are comrades in the fight against Mill Twitter. So,
Absolutely.
Mill Twitter is a bunch of mediocre folks in the military who think that they're so special because they're in the military, and it's like
They have a social media account.
Yes, sorry for swearing.
No, you need to swear. You need to drop all the F-bombs.
They crap on people who wear their veterans hats or their t-shirts and they're proud of being a vet, but at the same time it's like they do the same exact damn thing. It's like their whole persona, their whole personality is like, I'm an officer in the military, I do, and it's like their whole shtick, and it's like it's very unhealthy because you've got this, you can see there's this sense of like, I served, I am better than you. And the goons certainly don't feel that way, which is why I love them so much. And, for the goons, I'm sure people who've listened to your show know who the goons are.
Yeah, and if you don't, then hey, it's probably because you're not on Twitter. And I don't encourage anyone. I don't encourage anyone to get on Twitter. It's a cesspool.
And it's funny because my best friend, she I was under attack for something, and she comes on. I think you saw her come on, and I think you're going to meet her soon. And she's like, oh, if people are attacking your best friend, you come on to Twitter and defend her. I'm like, no. I'm like, get off. Don't come on here. It's just a cesspool. So yeah, it's creating this class of people who just think that they're above, it's further polarizing our society. It's like there's almost little middle ground, or at least the middle ground's being very quiet right now, and it's just, that's enough rambling for me, but I hope
that's
you know
good.
what I'm
So
saying.
I wanted to bring it to this because it was a few weeks back or a few months back, you had the opportunity to go to Afghanistan, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Can you kind of expound a little bit on that? Like what was your takeaway when you went? Like, what was the point? What were you sent there to kind of see or figure out? Like, what should the average, I don't know a damn thing about Afghanistan American at this point understand based on your trip there? What in the simplest terms, how can you break it down? Because you could probably break down the policy aspects to me and I'll be able to understand it and get it, and I'll be like, all right, I agree or disagree. But what does the person who has no fucking idea that we're still there need to know about that?
Let's see, of why we're in Afghanistan.
No, what, like, so you went there for a reason, right? So what was trying to be pushed to you to report back? What should, based on that, I guess, what would you say? What was your takeaway?
The takeaway is that the progress is extremely mixed, and it's very sugar coated. So when you see numbers of like this many Afghans have learned English, that's like super remedial English, not even maybe English at all. It's like these people sat in a classroom while we taught them some basic words, and then they graduated from this English class. Not to crap on Afghans at all, or the Afghan soldiers, But then you also had, so that was the very low end, and that was mostly, it's sort of like a factory. It's just pumping out, you know, figures. It's pumping out things to tell the public, is like, we trained these many people, we taught these many people, this many people English, we did this and that. And that's so much of what was, is, I think, considered progress. And so I really kind
Yeah.
of got to see what was going on. And then you got the high end, which is like they take the Afghans with very high aptitude, and they teach them English, they teach them how to fly, and you know, they teach them how to maintain planes, which is very difficult and takes several years to maintain, learn how to maintain and fly. Actually, some of them have to learn English first, some then they're taught how to fly, or you know, maintain. So there's like a whole spectrum of Afghans. um, it was interesting because you hear a lot of stories like that really kind of bring it home as to the difficulties of training Afghans. One medic said, I think he was a doctor, he said, if there's an Afghan guy who's bleeding on the ground, other Afghans will just kind of gather around, and they don't want to do anything because they're not, they don't have that I need to do something mentality. They're all scared, or they're afraid to do something. They
They
just
are not Americans. And I say that with the love in my heart. You need to understand the rest of the world is not the United States of America, who up until I guess recently with the social media fucking infestation, like we didn't all used to just stand around with our goddamn phones filming shit. We used to just take action and try and help someone.
right.
Right. That's a
And so,
cultural, that is a cultural thing. And as you're
exactly,
describing, that is absent from the ANA and the NAMP. It absolutely is.
exactly. So they said Afghans will let an Afghan dude bleed out on the
Yep.
ground
Absolutely.
unless, unless you tell him, help him.
Yeah.
And so that's the difficulty in like
It is
trying to
cultural.
build the Afghan military, you know, that people don't understand. And exactly, it's cultural. It's extremely hard to change. And I think I saw a video of like a bunch of Afghans trying to do jumping jacks, and like no one's doing the same, you know, no one's going at the
There's no
same pace.
cadence. There's no rhythm. Yeah. Like
um, and it's, you know, I'm not saying, I'm not like crapping on their I learned about corruption. So I remember I was down in Helmand, and I was talking to a colonel
there's
that
a nice
was
place.
down there. What's that?
I said, there's a nice place. I was never in
Yeah,
Helmand. I just heard all the stories. But go ahead.
it was pretty bare bones at the time. And so this colonel, it was funny because he told me, like, we're paying these warlords to help us, you know, we're paying them and we're paying these people. And I'm like, okay, what happens when the money runs out? And he was like, you know, I don't know.
I don't know.
And yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of just paying people to comply with you, and there's a lot of there was a lot of corruption. Actually, I haven't reported the story yet, but there's just a ton of corruption even in the Afghan military. And I really need to, there's so many good stories I wish I could, you know, do, but there's just so much happening, and so much we're expected to do, you know, like going back to like the news business, you know, it's like, I wish I could spend a week, 2 weeks, a month on like every story, but of course I can't, you know, because there's like 5 stories every single day
Yep.
that I don't even get to, you know. But yeah, so there's a crap load of corruption there, and just a lot of you know, patronage ties that we're not aware of, that just make it very extremely difficult for us to do anything, to have any kind of control over there. And you know, we're putting folks in very bad, you know, situations. You know, we're putting troops there.
Yeah. All right, Kristina.
Absolutely.
So check it out.
Yes.
You've done a lot of cool shit. What's your most memorable experience as a defense reporter? Like, what's the one trip you were like, oh, that's fucking awesome. I'm gonna remember that shit. What was it?
Hmm. 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 Afghanistan was pretty awesome because I was there for a month, completely disconnected from work, just doing my thing, collecting info, like every reporter's dream. That was awesome. Gitmo was interesting, but
You went to Gitmo? What was that like?
I went to Gitmo 3 times.
3.
Eh,
Damn.
I mean, it's just very inconvenient. Like you live in freezing cold tents, mostly because the other reporter had to keep it like very freezing cold at night. But then the bathrooms are like a walk away. If you want to go to like the bathrooms that are in a little container versus like the communal bathrooms where you have like a little canvas that goes to your lap and that's it. So I would always like get ready and then hold it and then go to the one where you like walk into the little container, with like a handle and it's all nice and air conditioned and clean. So that was like 30 minutes at least. So that was kind of a pain in the butt. And then it always seemed like there's nothing but Subway to eat. So that really
Yeah, that's a
sucked.
big problem.
Um, I was in the Persian Gulf, and that was pretty cool. So I went on like 3 different destroyers. So I went on an
Oh,
American
sweet.
destroyer, 2 British destroyer, Australian destroyer. That was pretty awesome. And I got really sick on the Australian because there was like some kind of storm. I thought we were gonna die. Um, I would say probably the Afghan one was so awesome because I got to fly around with Afghan pilots doing like drills. I also thought I was gonna die too. I thought we
Yeah,
were
I was gonna
going
say that's
down.
a
I thought
little.
we were, it was putting a lot of trust into these Afghan pilots. At one point, I really thought we were going down, and I thought we were going to be. I forgot what you call those dudes that are like crisscrossing in their motorcycles on the desert floor. They just sort of pick up like the shells and but so I was like, yep, we're going down and we're gonna get killed. But that didn't happen. Actually, after I left, the guys that I did fly with actually did get ambushed,
Oh, damn.
shot in the after, but they all were recognized for that. I've been to Asia a bunch. For some reason, they keep sending me to Asia.
Is
Not,
it because
the
you're
Defense
Asian?
Department. No, I think so. I've never been invited to Israel, which I really want to go to. Which is annoying, It's like send me to Israel or yeah, I've been to Saudi Arabia, but like kind of like
Did you
more on
really? You
my
went to
own.
Saudi Arabia? How was that?
I think it was just a passing through on a trip with Mattis. So it was like a Middle
Oh,
East
okay.
trip to Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, and like we even touched down in Pakistan, but Pakistan. Oh my God. That was freaking cool. So this was not a defense. This was not a Pentagon trip. This was a
Okay, go with that.
Pakistan embassy invited me to go on this like week-long trip. It's kind of like what they call, junket. And that's like they bring a reporter, they kind of show them around the country. And they introduce you to like business leaders and officials and experts and kind of give you an introduction to what the country's like. So that was pretty fascinating. I went to the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan where they're building a fence. So they're building this long fence. I don't know what the status is of the fence, but it's this long fence to keep out, supposedly to keep out like terrorists or from filtering from Pakistan into Afghanistan and vice versa, actually. So theoretically, you can't attack U.S. troops in Afghanistan and just like melt into Pakistan. But there was a sense that the fence is kind of for show, but it's I guess it's a show of the Pakistan is trying to do this to assuage the U.S. So Pakistan was pretty freaking cool. We went to some border gates along the border. again, you know, rode in some helicopters with some, I think it was like the best Pakistan pilots in the military, went to some bases in the hills. And you really get a sense of like, just how poor the country is. I mean,
Yeah.
there's also parts that are extremely rich. Um, like Islamabad was pretty developed, but I think Karachi, oh man, that was
Yeah.
Karachi.
That's the main port where we get
Yeah,
everything in and out.
yeah, gorgeous. And then we went to the port of Gwadar, and it's funny because China essentially owns that port. I think they lease it from the Pakistanis. And so, I mean, you've got like a Chinese company running the port, and you've got a bunch of Chinese workers, you've got a Chinese food restaurant, and you know, if you want to talk about like maybe a good strategic reason to be in Afghanistan, it's because China's moving all into Pakistan. They're building the Silk Road
Yeah.
through Pakistan, and it's so that they can get closer to the natural resources in the Middle East. So, right, if you the port of Gwadar is not too far away from the Persian Gulf. You know, the I think it's like the Sea of Oman or something, it's like the bottom of the Persian Gulf. So it's like if you have a land road from China through Pakistan all the way down to the Persian Gulf, it makes it a lot easier, and you're not as vulnerable to like some sort of U.S. blockade or something. You know, so maybe. So I've seen people argue, you know, some experts say, oh, we need to stay in Afghanistan because China and Pakistan and all that stuff. I don't know how, you know, valid that is, but that was a pretty cool trip. Oh, and being in Quetta, that was scary as hell. So we were in like these armored SUVs, and you're just surrounded by dudes carrying these giant guns, and they're all like covered up. You don't see any women. There are no women out. It's just men. It's like a ton of men, and they all look angry. You know, that's not to be like you know, I don't want to generalize, but I mean, it's really freaking hot too. So it's like if I were out there, you know, just sort of going through the desert or the, you know, underdeveloped area, I'd be pretty angry too. But that was scary because you don't know who's who. We had a reporter. There was a reporter on the trip who didn't want to go. I don't remember what happened to him, but he was like, I really don't want to go to Quetta. I think I'm just gonna go home. I'm not gonna, you know, go on this part of the trip because he literally thought he was going to be kidnapped and die. And I know my bosses were really worried about that too. But there's a part of me that's like, if I die, I want to die doing something cool. You know, if I die in a helicopter, knock on wood, you know, then at least I went out doing what I love.
I think that's pretty cool that you actually have that spirit. It's not to discount other reporters, because I feel like every reporter who involves themselves in some level of danger has something, right? I can kind of respect it, whether it's may not be my outlet of choice, but I can respect that. So now I want to kind of let the close it out, bring it full circle before we get out of here. Something that's a little bit more serious, something I can't I'll never understand or experience, but something that has been going on in this country and unfortunately in this state where I'm at in California. Um, but what is your view, or how do you feel about the recent it's not even an uptick, it's like it's just a full on, like, the displays of violence toward not just Asian Americans in this country, but it seems to be like a lot of it's targeted towards older Asians. How does that make you feel? Where do you come out on it? Have you experienced any negative behavior towards you? Like, what is your take on that?
Um, yeah, I think a lot of the violence against Asians, especially elderly Asians. So, I mean, yeah, we all know there was like a salon, you know, like one of those, like, I don't even know, like massage parlors that was shot
Yep.
up. There were, I think, three massage parlors that were shot up in Georgia.
Mhm.
Okay, you know, and yes, there are, you know, other instances of violence like that that are like, you know, spectacular attacks. but like for the most parts, I think these are economic crimes. I I think you do see. I would. So a large part of the crimes that I think are happening are due to just the COVID shutdowns is making people. First of all, I think it's like a perfect storm. There's fewer police on the street for whatever reason, maybe less money, lower budgets for police because of the upheaval last summer, the whole Black Lives Matter, Defund the police movement. So I think you have fewer police out and about. Then you have the pandemic that's really hurting people, hurting a lot of people who worked in maybe hospitality, working in restaurants, kind of like, hourly workers. So I think there's that. So you have like a propensity for crime, fewer police, vulnerable Asian vulnerable Asian community. And it's no secret Asians are seen as more vulnerable across the board. I mean, like no matter what age. And so like when I first got to DC, I was harassed all the time. And not even just when I got to DC, when I was in LA, when I was in Northern California, I've been harassed my whole life, right? By people. And it's because now I'm going on my little rant, but my theory is because people look at me, they see Asian woman, they don't know what I've done. They don't know who I am. They don't know what I think. They don't know I'll fight back. They don't know I'll yell back, whatever. They just see small-ish Asian woman and they think easy target. And then also the mainstream, like entertainment media, the way they portray Asian women too, or just Asians in general. They're either nerdy or they're, prostitutes or whatever. And it's like this, there is a huge sort of like portrayal of Asians as foreigners. It's always like, oh, the exchange student from Japan or something, right? And then, making fun of Asian accents is, oh, it's so funny, right? And so I'm not saying I get offended by that, but this is just something that's been uniform throughout my life, right? So when I look at these attacks against Asians and people say, oh, it's because of the Kung flu, because Trump said the coronavirus came from China. It's like, he said that maybe last year and it did come from China, right?
Right.
Well, what about all the other experiences in my whole life where people have said,
not exactly the Trump constituency carrying this stuff out.
Yeah, and there's that. So that makes me extremely angry because it's the faux caring. It's like crocodile tears over like, oh, let's help these poor, Asians because of this white supremacist racism or Trump racism. It's like, no, this has been around for a very long time. I think that there's higher violence because of the economic situation, because of fewer police and a vulnerable population. So I think it's this very bad mixture. And there might be also some of the whole like a media effect where if you highlight it, it'll happen more because you do see some crazies just be like, go home to China and like kick people, there was like this Filipino woman that like, or I think she was Filipino, this guy broke her rib. There was a video circulating where this woman was coming home from like church or something, and this guy comes up to her and kicks her, breaks her rib, and the hotel workers just close the door.
Oh yeah. Oh God, I haven't been that. Because that goes back to what I said earlier. It's like we're in this voyeur culture where we just fucking take our phones out rather than just fucking helping. Like that irks the shit out of me. Like it's a fucking elderly woman that is getting beaten, and your reaction as a security officer is to close the fucking door.
Right. And and I tweeted about this, and it's like I don't like and I don't like putting a lot of private personal information out there, but I would say I think it was like around 2013 I was violently mugged in DC when I was walking home. So this was like way before Trump, right? And it was at night. late at night, and DC is changing very quickly, right? So you have like some areas that are like not, it's very I hate the word, but gentrifying, but
Yep.
like
No, it's
during
true.
my,
It's a real word.
yeah, during my time in DC, things have like completely changed. So I'm walking alone by myself at night, and this kid comes up to me. He goes, "Hey." And I'm like, oh, God, yet another guy trying to harass me, because it happened all the freaking time when I first got here to DC.
Yep.
So I'm like, just ignored him. And that was probably the worst thing to do, because he said again, he said, "Hey." And then he reaches over and he grabs my phone with both his hands, and I'm still holding on to it. So he tries to yank it out of my hand. He starts, and I trip. And so he starts like dragging me, and I start screaming that, I'm help. I start screaming for help. And I have my purse, and I threw my purse on the ground towards these three dudes walking towards us. And I said, "Grab my purse." I was just, struggling with this guy, and yelling for help. And this guy says, "I'm going to shoot you." And he's like trying to get the phone from me. And yeah, it's a phone. It's a stupid phone, but still, I was like, I can take this guy. He's not that big. So he starts digging his nails into my knuckles, and it's like, okay, the phone's like slipping out of my hands, and he finally gets away. And the most upsetting thing, and some people were, because I mentioned this on Twitter, some people
Everyone's got a fucking opinion on Twitter.
exactly. The most upsetting thing was not, of course, the attack was very upsetting, right? It was very violating, and it made me, angry and everything. But it was upsetting because there were three dudes that were just nearby walking towards us who stopped. They literally were walking, and they stopped, and they stopped, and they watched, and they were young guys. And they're just like, and they look pretty sizable too, right? They weren't like small, weak dudes. They were like, kind of like
Mentally weak.
yeah. And as far as like their style, I mean, they were kind of like preppy dudes. I don't know much about them, but they were just these preppy dudes that were much bigger than me, certainly, probably around like,
Small heart
5'8".
syndrome.
Yeah, 5'8", 5'10", maybe even 6 foot. And there were three of them. And they just stopped and they watched. And I had never felt so like helpless and violated again by no one caring, no one saying anything, no one stepping in, no one just saying stop, not even grabbing my purse, which actually had a money order in there for like, I think it was like my rent, which was like $8.50 at the time. Like if only he had like taken my purse,
Yeah.
And a cop after, and this other dude, he comes running from across the street, and he comes over, and he was like, "Oh, you're shaking, calm down, and I appreciated that so much, because it was like someone cares enough to help you, even though he got there too late. It was like, and so the cops came, and the woman, it was a female cop, and she said that women are more likely to intervene when they see something. They're more
No,
likely to try to help.
I
And
think
she was
women are very loud in this country, and it works. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it works.
yeah,
No, that's because
yeah.
that bothers me about what the three you described, and it goes back to this fucking voyeur culture we're in. It's like everyone, it's not a numerical like inferiority position where it's like, oh, there's three of us, there's like 10 of them, nobody do like.
Mhm.
There's three of them. There's one dude who's like assaulting you and doing this act that they're witnessing, and their action is to sit and watch. Now I don't know what their conscience sits with them today. I don't know what they think, but I'm sorry, I just wasn't raised that way. That's not who I am. That's not my makeup. I would rather get my ass beat by someone who's trying to hurt someone else than just, well, I sure wish I would have just helped out, you know what I mean? But that's me. And no, I do appreciate you sharing that, because it ties into some cultural things that you've described, especially how a lot of Asian women specifically are portrayed in media and Hollywood or whatever. Yeah, I think there. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think you'd really have to soul search to find instances of strong characters or whatever. But I will say, from what I've always experienced, is I feel as if, I mean, there's a huge history. You know this. You grew up in the Bay Area, like, you know the history of Asians in that region. But my experience with Asian Americans is that, like, literally they're the hardest working people who just assimilate. They just work hard. They put their head down and they want to do what's best for themselves and their family. Like, the most unassuming, I think, ethnic group in this country, who just, they work hard, they start businesses, and they contribute to the economy. They do the exact opposite of what we don't want. They do literally everything that we expect people coming to this country to do, right? Work
Me-
hard, put your head down, start a business, give back to your community, all those things. And it just, it makes me sad, because of all the, just, I've in addition to yourself, I have several Asian friends, and it just breaks my heart to know that at some point they may experience this discrimination, and I don't. And that's why I just appreciate you sharing the story, because I don't know what it is you experience to this day, or what's going on now in 2021. And obviously you shared something from your personal history, but shit like that, it just bothers me. It really does, because I'm long past the point in this country where I wish we would just stop playing the identity politics bullshit and just be fucking Americans, and that's it.
Me too. And that's how I was raised, in East Bay, I shouldn't pinpoint it even further, but East Bay, California, exactly where I grew up, and just from my parents' upbringing of us, and just the friends I had, all different races. Race was
Yep,
never an issue. And
exactly.
there's going to be someone out there who's like, oh, you're racist for saying you don't see race. But,
There's always one, like I said, whatever.
and I wish, that's the thing I loved about the military, is that it's so diverse, and it wasn't an issue. But now it's like, it's always, at least from my perspective, it's like race is everything. And nowadays, and so I will just try to keep on calling it out. And it's hard. It's hard to call it out, but I will keep on doing it.
As you should. We're going to leave it there. We're going to pick this up, not on this topic, but we'll see Kristina again on Friday, hopefully, as long as no one has a, date with their godson like last week. But, but anyway, that's Kristina Wong. You see her all the time with her defense reporting from the Pentagon and other outlets. So please follow her. Kristina Wong on Twitter. What is it on Instagram?
So on Instagram, it's Kristina Wong. I think it's just at Kristina Wong. And then on Twitter, it's at Kristina_Wong.
Well, there you go. So that's where you can find Kristina. You can find her on Instagram doing all the leg tucks, which we didn't even get into. Great. So she's gotten very strong over the last year and makes effort. It's wonderful. You can watch it. You can track it. But then again, if you are, look at that gun right there. Gun show out, licensed, of course, in case you're checking on those things. But if you are watching and you've made it to this point, which I assume you have, you should follow and like this show. You should leave a rating, do all those things on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio. Like I said, subscribe and look for us next week with most likely Mr. Julio Rosas reporting live. It's riot season, ladies and gentlemen, in America, and Julio's there. So, Kristina, once again, thank you for joining me, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you for having me on.
Okay, you're welcome. Goodbye.